Hey, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome back to the stream. So sorry we had a weird little glitch there on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure what happened. We were live and then it cut out and then it wouldn't let me put it back live. So we had to get everything rebooted. So I appreciate you guys hanging tight for a second while we got everything back up and running. But it looks like we are good to go and we are live right now across platforms on YouTube, on Facebook, on Rumble, on Getter, and of course, to our locals family. You guys are the absolute best, and I'm so glad you are all here to kick off the week with us. I have had quite a crazy few days, kind of an insane span of 72 hours. On Friday night, I was supposed to fly to Ohio, direct, easy flight, no problems, no nothing, to celebrate my sister's white coat ceremony for medical school. And if you don't know what a white coat ceremony is, or you don't have anybody in your life that's in the medical field, a white coat ceremony is the day before the first day of classes for med school or pharmacy school or dental school or whatever, where you get your first ever white coat that originally came from the laboratory and then transitioned over into clinical medical settings. And you have this like big ceremony, and it's to kick off your first day on the road to being a healthcare practitioner, basically. It's a really big deal, and I was so excited to be here for my sister and just celebrate her. And I really wanted to recognize how hard she's been working over the past several years, because it has been a crazy few years of her busting her butt to get to where she is. And my flight ended up getting delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed on Friday, to the point that we left, I think, at like midnight. We were supposed to leave at like midnight. So we got on the plane. It ended up getting so delayed on the tarmac that the crew timed out, so they couldn't keep flying. It was illegal. And we spent the night on the floor of the airport on Friday night for about 2 hours before loading back up into a new flight. And then the same thing ended up happening on the way home. Delay, till it was canceled. So we flew in this morning. So I am a little sleep deprived, running on fumes a little bit, but that's a-okay. We are thriving, and it was so fun to celebrate my sister and her boyfriend Jared getting their white coats and just be with family and everybody leading up to a great week today. We have a lot to talk about, but because the whole weekend was spent talking about medicine and bioethics, I thought it would be fun to translate that back to the stream. So when I was on the plane this morning, came across an absolutely horrifying social media post about this new biotech startup company in San Francisco that is doing something a little crazy. If you haven't already read the description of this video or watched my short form video about it on Instagram, there's a lot to be said about playing God with what we're going to talk about today and totally crossing the line when it comes to bioethics in terms of my opinion. You might totally disagree with me, and if you do, I want your thoughts and your opinions throughout the entire stream today because this is a really sensitive subject that I think is only going to become more complicated as we continue breaking it down. So we're going to be unpacking a biotech startup company in San Francisco called Conception that recently announced they are going to be growing human egg cells from stem cells. So creating sex cells from a woman, but not from a woman, through a stem cell in a petri dish to basically eliminate womanhood altogether for the purpose of growing new human beings that they have complete control over in a laboratory instead of through natural fertilization or even in vitro fertilization. So absolutely crazy stuff. We're going to have some fun breaking that down today, and I want all of your active participation in the chat throughout all of it. Let's say hi to some people, though, before we start getting into the nitty-gritty of all of it. Over on YouTube, Evan's here. We've got Brown Rice watching, Dutch Canadians watching in the Netherlands. So very fun. Ethan says, what's up, what's up? First time watching live. Ethan, we're so glad that you're here. And if any of you are also watching for the very first time, let us know in the chat because it's so fun to get to know each other and grow our little community on this corner of the internet throughout the stream. XVI is here. Josh is watching. Frostfang is here. Los Ravosa is watching from Europe. We've got Red Scorpion watching over on Rumble. Emerson is here watching from Brazil. Hey, Emerson, I'm so glad you're here on Getter. We've got Nitty Witty. I did change the intro music the last few times. We're just playing with it. We're having some fun, mixing it up. You know what I mean? Gary Upchurch is here. Savage is watching from Idaho. I was born in Idaho and lived there a few times. We love Idaho. The Idaho, if you will. And of course, over on Locals, we've got the whole gang out in force. Crazy Cat Lady is here. Alex is watching. We've got M-Rock and AJ and Daniel Maynard watching. Oh, you guys are just the best. I love seeing your names on my screen every single day. GKU is here. African Warlord is watching. And so many others. You guys are the goats. You know that? Just absolutely love you guys so very much. And Ethan, you heard right. The Locals fam parties the best in the chat, which you guys are all invited to. And we'll do our Q&A after the stream over on Locals that all of you will be invited to as well. Mike just popped up in our YouTube chat and said, I'm watching from Israel. Love your setup. Shalom, Mike. I'm so glad that you are here. We love Israel on the stream and in all of my content. If you guys didn't already know, I made a documentary in Jerusalem last November that came out a few months ago, and you can watch it on whatever platform you're on right now, but Israel is easily my favorite country outside of the United States, and so I'm so glad we have our community spreading all the way to the Holy Land. As we're jumping into a very dystopian topic that makes you want to lose all faith in humanity, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor of the stream today that restores your faith in humanity, and that's our friends over at Public Square. If you guys know them, you already love them. If you don't know them, you need to check out Public Square. It's coming internationally soon, but right now it's just local to the United States, and you can check them out at publicsq.com or with their app Public SQ on the App Store or the Google Play Store if you're an Android user. They are an online marketplace they just announced more than 55,000 small businesses all across the country that share your values: pro-family, pro-America, pro-freedom, pro-faith, everything from skincare to meat shipped to your house from independent ranchers to people who help you do your taxes and personal trainers and everything you can possibly imagine. You guys have already told me you love Public Square, and everybody's been using it on crazy levels of engagement from our stream. I get contacted by them all the time how many people come over from our stream, so I'm so excited about that. I'm dropping a link right now in the chat. If you are a small business owner of any kind, your business needs to be on Public Square. A ton of you have already put your business over there and told me you have a massive group of customers that you wouldn't otherwise have if you weren't over there. So you can use that link to add your business and, of course, find businesses that you can use to replace all the gross, horrible, woke, crazy places you don't want to shop anymore. All of it is over on Public Square, and we absolutely love them. So thank you guys so much for your support of the stream. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of conversation already start about our subject for the stream today in the chat, which I'm super excited about. And I want to address one before we jump into the 30,000 foot overview of what's really going on. Los Ravosa said, I don't think they will ever create a human in a lab, though. Creation means all new processes for the first time. They can only copycat God, and that's pretty much it. And I totally agree with that take. Most of the comments that I'm really resonating with on my Instagram, very short form version of what we're talking about today, also center around you can create the cellular basis of a human being, but human beings cannot create the souls of other human beings. And so I think this is going to be a really fascinating new frontier in science that ultimately I believe will flop, will fail, because that's absolutely correct. You can't create a soul of a human being in a laboratory. You can create the necessary parts for that to happen. But at some point, if you keep playing God too much and you keep pushing the boundaries of the relationship between humanity and God, God's not going to be very happy about that whole situation. So I'll be curious to see how this unfolds. But in case you didn't read the description of this video or have seen the Instagram video that I just posted a few hours ago, what we are talking about today is a San Francisco-based startup company. It's a biotech company that's innovating new technology in the biosphere, okay? So mostly for medicine, but just biological technology in general. And I'll say up front, if you guys didn't already know this about me, I was pre-med in college. My major was biomedical sciences. I ended up not wanting to do pre-med and stay in that track to work in hospitals, and so transitioned more to a policy side of things for grad school before God obviously threw a huge wrench in my life, and now I do this for a living, which is the exact opposite of anything I ever dreamed that I would be doing, but attended graduate school at Georgetown University, and I studied biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy, and throughout all 5 years of my higher education experience was drilled over and over and over again by my professors, by the experts that we brought in to speak to our classes, by my textbooks, by everyone, people I shadowed in the lab or worked with in the lab or shadowed in the operating room, like every person remotely tied to biotech, to bioinnovation, to medicine, to healthcare practitioner roles, completely reinstated over and over and over again the importance of something called bioethics. Understanding the boundaries between just because something can be done doesn't necessarily mean that it should be done, and opening a window from this could help people to this could also really, really harm people. And as we continue talking about bioethics today, I want you to keep that in mind, that just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should, and where is helping people then turning into destroying the human race potentially. So this company Conception announces, I guess this week, I saw the article this morning, so it's brand new information, everybody's just now talking about this, that they want to turn stem cells into human egg cells. And if you don't remember sophomore year biology, or you didn't take physiology or human gross anatomy or advanced cellular biology in college like I did and spent many a late night cramming for tests for several years, a stem cell is essentially the most basic human cell, the most basic building block for biological life. And if properly directed and given the proper signaling, either in your body through neurotransmitters or hormones, or even at a more local level, cellular signaling modules, if properly directed, those stem cells can go into any type of cell. And even outside of the human body, you can program a stem cell artificially in a laboratory to differentiate into all kinds of different cells. So if we're talking about a stem cell, it doesn't always necessarily pertain to the human body. It can pertain to any biological matter of life. We just talked about stem cells a few weeks ago when we were talking about lab-grown meat, that they are taking a pluripotent stem cell, meaning a stem cell that can turn into any type of cell, given the right messaging and the right signaling and direction by scientists, to turn into meat that we can eat, like actual animal-based meat at the cellular level, even though it happened in a laboratory and not through butchering an animal. So what this particular company is wanting to do is take one of those stem cells that can be differentiated into anything, any type of cell ever, and turn them into reproductive cells, human eggs, which, if you know anything about basic biology, unlike certain members of our Supreme Court, egg cells come from who? You can all shout it out in the chat. Women. Women produce the reproductive cells of eggs. Men produce the reproductive cells of sperm. And when an egg cell and a sperm cell fuse, they create a new human being. Well done. Easy, understand, basic biology 100. Well done. You all get A pluses through all of that. Interestingly, we've used stem cells in biotech. We've used stem cells in medicine. We've used stem cells in surgery or as an alternative to surgery for a very, very long time in clinical medicine. So the idea of artificially manipulating stem cells is not new. The idea of even injecting stem cells into somebody's body to regenerate a hip that might otherwise need replacing, not a new idea. I have an aunt that just did that a few months ago. Stem cells are absolutely fantastic. They're fascinating. And the reality that we have scientifically to manipulate stem cells to make people's lives better blows my mind. Like, just nerd out moment. Biotech is absolutely amazing. And I wish we spent more time investing into stuff like that than the stupid crap that we deal with on the most basic level of American society and politics every single day. Jake, thank you so much for your donation in our chat. Appreciate you. But where this hasn't happened before and where we're doing something new is turning a stem cell, wow, Isabel needs caffeine, into a reproductive cell. This is new. This doesn't happen. Whenever we've cultivated fertilization outside of the human body, it's been called in vitro fertilization, and we've had to take eggs, human egg cells, reproductive cells, out of the body of a woman to put into a petri dish to make a new human being happen, to make fertilization happen outside of the body. If they are experiencing infertility, if they can't grow a human being, they have a hostile uterus, all kinds of stuff. In vitro fertilization is used for surrogacy. It's used for all kinds of stuff. We've not gone this far to take a stem cell and turn it into the reproductive cell. This is taking a step backwards in the process from anything that we've ever done. And this company, Conception, wants to be the one to make that happen. So I don't want to speak for the company. I want them to speak for themselves. And let's just read what they want to do, because it's horrifying. At first glance, it probably sounds great. And then you keep reading and your soul just wants to die a little bit inside, I guess. Our mission: we want to help parents have kids, and we aspire to make future generations healthier. At face value, I have absolutely no problem with this sentiment. I have absolutely no problem with this sentence. The role of healthcare practitioners is to help people have kids, be healthy, right? To help facilitate healthy fertility, and of course, aspiring to make the next generation healthier than the generation that came before them. That's the nature of medicine and the nature of innovation in medicine as we know it and have known it for thousands of years of human history. Here's where I started feeling about the entire thing. We are working on a technology called in-vitro gametogenesis. Again, if you weren't a scientist or you don't understand what those words mean, in vitro meaning in a petri dish outside of the body, gametogenesis meaning the creation, genesis, of gametes or sex cells. Gametes meaning sperm cells or egg cells, but in this particular situation, they want to grow human egg cells in a petri dish from a stem cell, not allow that process to happen naturally inside of a woman's reproductive system. That would give women the opportunity to have children well into their 40s and 50s, eliminate barriers for couples struggling from infertility, and potentially allow male-male couples to have biological children. Long term, this technology could be a critical platform allowing for widespread genetic screening of embryos. I'm going to keep reading and then provide my analysis afterwards, but if your hair on the back of your neck didn't just stand up reading that sentence, it should have. If proven safe, it could even eliminate and reduce the risk of devastating diseases for future generations, such as Alzheimer's, heart disease, and many different types of cancers. This could be one of the most important technologies ever created. So paragraph 1, we want people who otherwise wouldn't have the biological capacity to have children be parents. And the only way to do that is to have your own biological child, even if your body is not receptive to that, or your body literally doesn't have the process of creating a biological child. You're not a woman. We can't focus on adoption. We can't encourage the millions of children who don't already have families to have parents. Interesting. And also fascinating that at the same time we are advocating for anybody who wants to be a parent to have kids, That's what they say on their own website. We want to help parents have kids. At the same time they're advocating for that, we are also attacking the nuclear family societally, at the societal level. We don't want people to have families. We're telling my generation of women, young women who are fertile and are capable of biologically conceiving and carrying a child, now you don't want to have kids. Kids are really bad. They're bad for your life. They're bad for your future. They're bad for your career. They're bad for the environment. But it's okay for women in their 40s and 50s or men to have kids, just not women of childbearing age. Interesting how at the same time, our society is saying, we want anybody who wants to be a parent to have a kid, and we will grow an egg cell for you in a petri dish in a laboratory if you're unable to do so. We're also telling society we are overpopulated as a world, which isn't true, by the way, but that's what the powers that be are saying. We're overpopulated, we're destroying the earth, and the only way to save us all from inevitable destruction is to stop having kids immediately. So before we even get to the screening embryos genetic mutations situation, this paragraph alone is a complete conundrum to me. It is an entire paradoxical contradiction from what we're saying in society. Kids are bad. You shouldn't want kids. We should abolish the nuclear family, and we're overpopulated and destroying the earth. Now to anybody, even if they cannot biologically have a child, should have the right to have a child, and we will grow the cells to make that even happen, let alone grow a baby for you in a lab to make that happen. Walking contradiction. And I have a lot of problems with that. Why is it okay for our society to say that we will grow all of the necessary parts to create a human being? But as soon as you want to get married and naturally conceive a bunch of children and raise them appropriately, you're evil. Doesn't quite pass the smell test to me. And then let's talk about this little nugget of wisdom. Widespread genetic screening of embryos. Anybody want to take a stab at what that really means? We talked about it a lot with this, what was it called? Ecto-life or whatever, the lab chambers, the pods that they want to start growing babies in, where they're going to be screening their genetic makeup while they're growing in the pods that a German scientist in the EU is proposing we turn into. Interesting that it's worded almost exactly the same way. They basically are saying, from what I'm gathering, and this is tinfoil hat Isabel speaking, I don't want to speak for the company. I'm just reading their own words on their website. They want embryos not to grow in a womb, but to be cultivated in a lab down to the cellular level of gametes before they're even fused to make an embryo, so that they can genetically modify and screen them however they want, specifically for the purpose of eliminating devastating diseases for future generations like Alzheimer's, heart disease, and cancer. Quiet part out loud, they just won't let anyone who has the genetic proclivity for Alzheimer's, for heart disease, or for cancer to ever exist, period. How is this not overtly eugenics? I mean, it is. It's literally eugenics. Just right in front of your face, point blank. But how are people reading this website and cheering on this type of innovation? How are people not thinking, something just isn't quite right? When you say you want to eliminate, through genetic screening and modification and growing the gametes for a child, any bad disease that could potentially impact any future generation. And you're doing that while you're attacking the natural conception of children, because family is bad. Family bad, nuclear family evil. Children anti-woman and anti-feminist. No. And anti-environment. But lab children, good. Lab children, fantastic. Petri dish gametes, we're in the clear. Am I the only one absolutely freaking out about this? It is literally a brave new world. I feel like I'm living in like an episode of The Matrix or Blade Runner. A lot of you guys are talking about this one movie that I've never seen. How have I not seen this? Gattaca? I've never seen this. Everybody was commenting that on my Instagram. I have no idea how I have not seen this. Am I even saying that right? That might be really embarrassing. But I feel like we're in a movie. I feel like we are in a dystopian film where the worst possible scenario is inching and creeping closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer with every passing day. And instead of calling this out for what it is, which is point blank eugenics, we celebrate this by saying this could become one of the most important technologies ever created. When I read this second paragraph this morning on the plane, I instantly wanted to vomit and just throw up on everything because it really reminded me of an article that I saw a few years ago where Iceland was heralding their success of being the first country ever in the world to eradicate, that's the word that they used, Down syndrome. And if you actually clicked on the headline that was going super viral all over the world on the internet, the actual article explained that the reason that they eradicated Down syndrome from their society was that 99.9% of children who get a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome while they are in the womb are aborted in Iceland. That basically there's no possible chance of survival. There's no possible chance of being born if you receive a diagnosis of Down syndrome in the womb and you are conceived and carried in Iceland, which is the opposite of eradicating a disease. That's just eugenics. That's just straight up genocide, to be honest with you. And everybody was heralding this as a phenomenal success, as a hallmark of progress in modern Western society, without acknowledging that that type of programming and that type of ideological indoctrination and subordination to make everybody adhere to that type of belief is exactly what every dystopian movie that keeps us up at night is advocating for too. It is exactly what the scientists of the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party were advocating for in 1930s and 1940s Germany. To a T. And today, instead of calling it fascism, instead of calling it totalitarianism, instead of calling it horrifying manipulation of what health care is supposed to be, we call it progress. We call it empowering. We call it innovation. But in reality, what a project like this conception module would do is erase the role of parents entirely and erase the concept of making future generations healthier. Because how can you make future generations healthier if you can't make future generations? If they are not going to let anybody be born, anybody exist, anyone even be conceived that doesn't pass the widespread genetic screening of the perfect Aryan race, basically. The healthiest, fittest, most competitive biologically among us. We've erased the role of womanhood through grammar and through language and through cultural customs in society up till now in 2023. You're not a mom, you're a birthing person. You're not a woman, you're a person who menstruates. Suits, thank you so much for your donation. Appreciate you. You are not a girl, you're a person with a uterus. And pregnant men are glossing the front covers of all of our women's magazines, to the point that the concept of motherhood and the concept of being a parent has been completely manipulated. But I guess it's not enough to just not call a mom a mom. It's not enough to not call a woman a woman. You actually have to eliminate the role of a woman entirely. Because if you don't need a woman for her eggs, if you don't need a woman for her gamete cells, if you don't need a woman to be a surrogate for a child, either through natural conception with her partner or with in-vitro fertilization, then you don't need women, period. You don't need women at all. It's just completely eliminated. And if you don't need healthcare, if you don't need doctors, if you don't need nurses, if you don't need the good parts of the pharmaceutical industry to roll out disease, if you can just eliminate all of that up front, you've solved every problem in all of human history. Because every, what they want to call future generation, I don't know how much I believe that passes this widespread genetic screening is going to be perfectly healthy, is going to be without any devastating disease, any crippling of their body, any physical abnormality or deformation. They will be perfect in the eyes of their maker, conception, this biotech company, or whoever else follows suit. And call me crazy, I feel like we've seen this movie before. I feel like this is the exact reason everyone tells us to study history and not be doomed to repeat it by remembering the past. We've come to a cultural contract and a cultural compact, certainly a covenant with God, over the course of human history, that we were all supposed to be equal. At least we were supposed to be equal under the law in Western society, in modern, actually progressive society, in a society based in one nation under God that acknowledged we are all made in the image of God. We are all worthy of the same protections under law. But when you live in a country that doesn't even acknowledge your right to life, it's a pretty slippery slope to get to the point that your right to life also means your right to biological processes, also means your right to even be thought of as a potential human being because you didn't pass the screening. I have no idea what this is going to mean for people with bad eyesight or short people at the silliest level, but certainly autistic individuals, people with Down syndrome, people with cerebral palsy or spina bifida, people with heart defects. We've already begun weeding those people out through the evil, horrifying reality of abortion. But it seems the powers that be, people with resources and money and technology on their side, are now asking the question, if we can't have abortion, how do we take this back one step further? How do we eliminate conception naturally in its entirety so that those individuals would never have even been conceived in the first place? And when you start playing that game in your mind and play that tinfoil hat version of the game, which is my favorite, as you guys know, it's easy to understand how all of these things are working together, right? It's easy to understand how the abortion industry and the surrogacy industry and in vitro fertilization, which has many, many positive impacts, but can be used for bad, can be used for evil. How the child sex and gender transition industry is being utilized to make people infertile so that they have to rely on things like this later on down in life. It's so easy to understand how all of the red strings are ultimately connected to the same point later on down the line or earlier on down the line, right? All of these initiatives are being propagated and are being funded and are being encouraged by the same people to get to the same end goal. And ultimately, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to what that goal is, but I think it's based in ultimate power over other human beings. It's based in ultimate control over society, to the point that this isn't just about controlling what foods you can get at the grocery store or where you shop or financial institutions or the stock market. It goes down to our most basic level of biology, even further than our gender, even further than our chromosomes. This goes all the way down to our cellular makeup. Because if you don't need certain cells anymore because you can just create them, then you don't need human beings, period. And awfully ironic that all of this is being rolled out at the same time as humanoid AI robots that we talked about last week. And I know, you guys are telling me, Isabel, you sound insane, right? I'm sure you are thinking that. I'm certainly thinking that. I sound like a freaking insane, crazy, off her rocker person. If you had asked me a few years ago, in 2019 when I graduated from undergrad, or in 2020 when I graduated from grad school, if any of this would have remotely been on my radar, I would have laughed in your face. I would have thought you were a psychopathic mental institution patient that had no idea what they were talking about, because that technology just didn't exist yet, but certainly was far too dystopian for us to ever embrace with wide open arms in society. Instead, here we are. In 2023. We've not gotten enough from abortion and calling that healthcare. We've not gotten enough from making children infertile through physical or chemical castration and calling that healthcare. We've not gotten enough from eliminating the word woman or mother in healthcare settings and instead pretending like there can be pregnant men and that we don't need mothers or breastfeeding or any of the above at all, but just calling it whatever we want and calling that healthcare. Now we are actually generating new human beings, not just through in vitro fertilization, but at the cellular level, and calling it healthcare. Newsflash, it's not healthcare. In fact, this type of technology and what they are proposing here with this lab startup company Conception, I would argue, is the exact opposite of what any medical practitioner or healthcare practitioner should ever want to align themselves with, or certainly any researcher should ever want to align themselves with, period. It flies in the face and is a complete contradiction to what we would consider to be providing health to the next generation, to be encouraging and incentivizing health for the next generation, and what every healthcare practitioner promises to do on their graduation day from medical school, from nursing school, PhD programs, etc., where they are supposed to recite this, the Hippocratic Oath, which of course, they don't do much of these days. The Hippocratic Oath has gone a bit by the wayside, and I'll show you what it's being replaced with in certain educational institutions of the country here in just a second. But if you've never read the Hippocratic Oath, I think it's important to understand what healthcare practitioners throughout all of human history, going back to the Greeks essentially, throughout the entire field of medicine's evolution in human history, what are these practitioners actually promising to do, if you don't already know what the Hippocratic Oath says? The Hippocratic Oath says, "I swear by Apollo and the physician, and all these other gods and goddesses as my witnesses, that according to my ability and judgment, I will keep this oath and this contract. To hold him who taught me this art equally dear to me as my patients, to be a partner in life with him and to fulfill his needs when required, to look upon his offspring as equals to my own siblings, and to teach them this art, if they shall wish to learn it, without fee or contract, and that by the set rules, lectures, and every other mode of instruction, I will impart a knowledge of the art to my own sons, and to those of my teachers, and to students bound by this contract, and having sworn this oath to the law of medicine, but to no others. I will use those dietary regimens which will benefit my patients according to my greatest ability and judgment, and I will do no harm or injustice to them." Do no harm or injustice. "I will not give a lethal drug to anyone if I am asked." Told you that has gone out the wayside in modern American medicine. "Nor will I advise such a plan. And similarly, I will not give a woman a pessary to cause an abortion. In purity and according to divine law, I will carry out my life and my art. I will not use the knife, even upon those suffering from stones, but I will leave this to those who are trained in this craft. Into whatever homes I go, I will enter them for the benefit of the sick, avoiding any voluntary act of impropriety or corruption, including the seduction of women or men, whether they are free men or slaves. Whatever I see or hear in the lives of my patients, whether in connection with my professional practice or not, which ought not to be spoken of outside, I will keep secret, as considering all things to be private. So long as I maintain this oath faithfully and without corruption, may it be granted to me to partake of life fully and the practice of my art, gaining the respect of all men for all time. However, should I transgress this oath and violate it, may the opposite be my fate." Fascinatingly, it's the National Institute of Health website that we are on right now, the NIH, who today would swear that providing lethal injections to people and advising physician-assisted suicide or causing abortions is health care, is vital, life-saving health care, even though on their own website they're admitting that it's not. And as I just mentioned, sadly, the Hippocratic Oath is not being recited at every single medical school upon graduation day. Just a year ago, Columbia University's School of Medicine recited a new Hippocratic Oath that I found quite interesting. Listen to this. This is absolutely crazy. Again, this is at Columbia University Medical School.
For the first time in VPNS history, an oath has been written by the entering class to take at the white coat ceremony. The writing for this oath was facilitated by upper class students and faculty, and the oath is found at your seat in your program.
So I guess this actually wasn't at their graduation. I was mistaken. This is also at their white coat ceremony. So I just went to a white coat ceremony this last weekend. They also wrote an oath that I thought was really good for my sister and her boyfriend's incoming class. But listen to this one.
The class wrote the oath to reflect the values they wish to uphold as they enter their medical training. And I'm thinking of the words of our speaker today. They invite all physicians in attendance to join them in the recitation of the oath if they so choose. Class, please stand. In our profession, it is a custom established more than 2,000 years ago to articulate and commit to our guiding values, influenced by both the past and present, before accepting the privilege of caring for our fellow humans as students of medicine. Please join me. We enter the profession of medicine with appreciation for the opportunity to build on the scientific and humanistic achievements of the past. We also recognize the acts and systems of oppression affected in the name of medicine. We take this oath of service to begin building a future grounded in truth, restoration, and equity, to fulfill medicine's capacity to liberate.
So medicine is actually really oppressive. It always has been, especially when you were promising to do no harm. But now that we do harm in the modern field of medicine, now we're not oppressing, we're liberating through all of that, which makes total sense when you're living in the upside down, right?
I make this pledge to myself, my classmates and future colleagues, and the individuals and communities I will serve. I acknowledge that my role is to inform my patients, accompanying them in moments of wellness and vulnerability, and respect their privacy and autonomy while empowering them to flourish. I promise to take care of my future patients by engaging in dialogue, listening to their lived experience, and tailoring my recommendations to their unique circumstances. I commit to honor the relationship formed between patient and physician by maintaining confidentiality at all times. I vow to contribute to the field of medicine through ethical study and equitable evidence-based care, and to treat my patients and represent my profession with compassion, humility, and equanimity. I acknowledge the past and present failures of medicine to abide by its obligation to do no harm, and affirm the need to address systemic issues in the institutions I uphold. I promise to critically examine the systems and experiences that impact every person's health and ability to receive care. I vow to use this knowledge to uplift my patients and disrupt the injustices that harm them as I forge the future of medicine. I acknowledge the background and experiences that enrich my perspectives while recognizing the limitations, shortcomings, and biases that I bring to each encounter with patients and colleagues. I promise to self-reflect diligently, to confront unconscious prejudices, and to develop the skills, knowledge, and character necessary to engender an inclusive, equitable field of medicine. I commit to fostering empathy and a culture of care, not just for our patients, but for ourselves and our colleagues in healthcare.
So I'm hearing the word equity quite a bit. In the most realistic sense, health equity does actually make sense if you think about the definition of health equity, right? You want everyone equitably in society to be healthy. You want them all to be equally healthy. And ultimately, in the field of medicine, if you think critically about this and like zoom out from the immediate of equity, the dream would be everyone having the same end result of being healthy. That's the difference between equality and equity, right? You would love for everyone to be equally healthy at the end of the day. That is the role of a healthcare practitioner, to do no harm, to ensure that all of your patients are treated equally, even if you have fundamental differences from those people, that you vowed to take care of them and to provide actual health care to them. But what Columbia University medical students are saying is equity is really the opposite of health equity. It's ensuring that some people get priority over others. It's ensuring that DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, that really mean the opposite of diversity, equity, and inclusion in America, take precedence over biology or over actual need when it comes to healthcare practitioners. The entire thing absolutely blows my mind. And the idea that they keep saying, I'm going to outdo the injustice or recognize the injustice and fight it that exists within the healthcare system, they don't actually mean that. Because if they meant that they were going to fight existing systems of injustice in healthcare, they would be fighting the abortion industry. They would be fighting the castration of children. They would be fighting the sexual education of children, to the point that kids who are being trafficked have this covered up all of the time from their traffickers in doctors' offices, in Planned Parenthood clinics, etc., all over the country. They don't actually mean that. What they mean is promoting authoritarian leftism in the field of medicine.
I vow to remember the humanity and fallibility of myself and every member of the care team, and to call upon my colleagues for assistance in recognition of the limits of my knowledge and skills. I acknowledge and embrace the diversity that exists within all communities and the formative influence that the Washington Heights community will have on my future as a physician. I promise to respect, regardless of identity or socioeconomic status, the fundamental dignity of all patients, colleagues, and community members, and the right to quality care. I vow to restore trust where it has been broken, and to inspire and nurture trust in the relationships I build with patients through collaborative effort with my colleagues and communities. Let us bow our heads in recognition of the gravity of this oath. We swear to faithfully engage with these ideals and obligations for the ongoing betterment of medicine and humanity.
Wow. So that's Columbia University, an Ivy League medical school, one of the highest rated medical schools in the country, trying to erase the importance of actually taking the Hippocratic Oath by replacing it with something very, very bizarre. Like, I just can't quite put my finger on it, but it's not passing the smell test. And when we keep asking these questions of just because you can doesn't mean you should, I want us to think really critically, not just about this project from Conception, the San Francisco-based startup that's wanting to grow human gamete cells from stem cells, but every major biotech and innovation and healthcare subject that is coming up in American society today and in Western society across the board today. Because when you read things like this, in our lab, we reconstitute the process under which egg cells would normally develop, i.e. this is not normal, inside the female body. We generate induced pluripotent stem cells from blood samples. We then shepherd these stem cells through the various steps that they would normally undergo as they develop to become viable eggs. We and others have shown that this technology works to make viable mouse eggs and can be used to make healthy live mice. We are working on translating this technology to humans with the aim to make it a safe and accessible reproductive treatment. Our current focus is to create a proof of concept human egg and develop rigorous process optimization and quality control measures to ensure that the eggs are healthy. We do not take the development of this technology lightly. Our hope is that it will one day be used to bring healthy kids, not unhealthy kids, into the world, so we must hold ourselves to very high safety and ethical standards. Our plan will be to work closely with scientific, regulatory, and ethical experts to ensure this technology develops safely and responsibly. And then they show their entire team of scientists, which is incredibly long. Say, hey, we're hiring. Please come work for us in Berkeley, California, of all places, obviously, including as a what? Gene and cell editing scientist. Help us manipulate and edit cells to support egg cell development, because that's not absolutely horrifying, so that they can be the next great frontier. All of these very dystopian, very anti-Hippocratic opposite of healthcare measures that are being undertaken in modern American society today, whether it be growing gametes and creating new human beings in a lab, child testosterone treatment to make a 12-year-old girl go through menopause before she ever goes through puberty in the name of science, ensuring that trans individuals who wouldn't ordinarily have the biological capacity to breastfeed can start lactating and provide adequate nutrition to children, which we're still trying to figure out, but there's been entire stories about that in the last several weeks. I could keep going example by example by example by example. All go to show you that just because we have the capacity to engage in a certain concept and bring that concept to life, just because we can do something certainly does not mean that we should. And I find it fascinating that we say we live in the most progressive, we live in the most advanced, we live in the greatest society in the history of the world. And yet, while we are developing the capacity to grow human beings and edit their genes in a laboratory, something that would be far beyond the wildest dreams of anybody behind us in the chapters of our history books throughout the human story, we also lack the capacity as a society to ask that bioethical question. Is this even something we should be doing in the first place? And I think it's because we've accepted in modern society that innovation trumps critical thinking. That progress for the sake of progress is always a good thing, even if it ends up regressing our society and instituting and providing a thriving environment for actual evil. We can't solve crises like homelessness or drug addiction or obesity and diabetes or cancer because we can't quite figure out the critical thinking aspect there, or we can't quite get around the political correctness aspect there, but we are smart enough to grow new human beings in a lab. The dichotomy is astounding to me. And I'll leave you with this. As I was watching my sister at her white coat ceremony this last weekend, and an entire incoming class of several hundred new medical students starting out on their first day of med school today, but certainly yesterday getting their white coats, I was totally in awe of how smart these young individuals were, meeting some of my sister's new friends, meeting their professors and their deans. Like, the intelligence is absolutely there. And I remember from being pre-med myself, the aspect of critical thinking that was such a huge part of my curriculum that I am so eternally grateful for. And if given the opportunity, would never go back and change my major. I'm so glad that I was able to look at the world through the lens of a scientist and start asking the big questions about the universe, engage in the pursuit of objective truth, and ask the ethical questions of how can we help humanity improve for all of the generations who come after us. But I'm seeing, particularly in a post-COVID era, in more situations than not, that critical thinking aspect not just disappear and be eliminated from science, which is really no longer about the pursuit of objective truth at the macro level of society, but that critical thinking and ethical question is actually attacked more often than not in modern society. We have the technology and the capacity and the innovation and the intelligence to do just about anything we could ever set our minds to. We could go colonize Mars tomorrow if we really wanted to. We can grow new human beings in a petri dish. We can change the gender of someone to the point that a biological male might have the capacity to grow a child inside of their body, probably through their liver, which is mind-blowing information that is enough to make your brain just feel like scrambled eggs. We have the capacity and the intelligence and the technology and the IQ to do all of these things. But as Magic Def so eloquently points out in our locals chat, IQ and intelligence is not the same as wisdom. And what our society seems to be lacking today, particularly in medicine and healthcare and science at large, is wisdom. We have a fundamental misunderstanding of what the betterment of society is actually supposed to look like, because we are rushing for progress to live in a progressive society simply for the sake of saying we live in a progressive society, even if, full circle on the hamster wheel, it ends up regressing human rights, regressing innovation, regressing biology and health, and how we care for one another in society over time. When you see stories like this, which absolutely you need to share with everybody you know, by the way, so that everybody's aware, please do not conceive a child with this conception laboratory in San Francisco, in Berkeley. We're not doing that. When you see stories like this, think critically, not just intelligently about how do they even do that, how does that process work at the cellular level, but through wisdom. Think about how this is going to impact disabled people in the future, how this might impact minorities, how certainly this is already impacting women who are just not needed anymore in society, I guess, and therefore can just be wage slaves to corporate CEOs in major urban metropolises for the rest of their life instead of worrying about what their motherhood role is going to be if a family is something that they are called to. Not every woman is, but many are. Think about what this might mean in preventing people from being born. We talk about that a lot within the context of the abortion industry. Think of how many presidents, how many saints, how many popes, how many amazing people that would have advanced society never got the chance to be born. But what if those people also never even got the chance to be conceived? That's horrifying to think about. And as our society is fighting for actually putting an end to injustice with abortion, with literal racism that does exist in modern society and is perpetrated by critical race theory, actual injustice of child gender transition and mutilation of their genitals in the name of progress, as we keep fighting these injustices and winning, like a reversal of Roe v. Wade, like a cultural shift that is happening with my generation on the issue of abortion that I see every day, just as one example, and every other topic that we talk about as well, I want you to know that they are not going to give up this fight that easily. They will keep thinking to themselves, how can I go one step backwards to keep winning at their own game? Instead of preventing babies from being born, how can I prevent them from being conceived? Instead of erasing women by turning them all into men, how about I literally erase women from society because we actually don't need female gamete cells anymore at all? This backwards rollback of how they can control everything down to the cellular level is not going to stop simply because we get a win here and a win there and added ground here and changed of minds over here. It's going to keep happening unless we have the wisdom and the courage to speak up and fight like hell for truth to be brought back to a world without any truth. Especially if any of you guys are watching and you are teenagers or you're in high school and you're not quite sure what you want to do with your life. I obviously am telling you now, do what I say and not what I do, because I didn't go into the healthcare industry formally. Thank goodness my sister and her boyfriend are, because we need humble, wise, smart, intelligent, courageous people who have wisdom to engage in the healthcare field. But if any of you are even remotely considering going into healthcare, please do. Perhaps the greatest void of objective truth happens in science today in 2023 America. And going forward, we desperately need more truth-based, wise, faithful individuals as nurses, as doctors, as PhD candidates, as researchers, as pharmacologists, as anybody that's possibly advancing actual health care for the next generation of Americans and citizens all over the globe who are going to be continued to be pushed into this back corner of let us grow your baby in a laboratory or you just won't ever even have a chance to be born. I am cheering you on every step of the way, and we desperately need your help if we're going to regain ground in this area. Keep speaking the truth, keep having these conversations, keep making people aware of what's really happening behind the scenes and how a glossy, beautiful website with a bunch of really cool graphics and good sounding buzzwords is not the future that we want to live in. This future is not real. Because if you can read between the lines, they don't want to help parents have kids. They don't want people to be parents. We know enough of that from the your kids or our kids conversation. And they certainly aren't aspiring to make future generations healthier. They're just not going to let future generations exist if they aren't what the overlords would consider to be healthy. Fight back. because if we don't, there will literally be no one left to fight for us after this. And side note, perhaps the greatest way that you can fight back is get married and have a bunch of babies, because the only way that we can fight this weird unnatural conception is to naturally conceive a bunch of babies ourselves and raise them in good values and objective truth, which is exactly what I plan on doing. Speaking of that, I got a bunch of wedding stuff to do this afternoon, so we are going to cut it there for the stream today. But first, we're going to jump over to Locals for our Q&A for a few minutes. So I am dropping the link right now in our live chat for you guys to join us over there. You are all invited. And if you don't know anything about Locals, or you're one of our first-time viewers like Ethan, who viewed us today, who watched the stream in real time, Locals is kind of like social media, but not. It's for people who hate social media, basically. You guys get to interact with each other a lot more. You can post in our community and take on an active role in speaking up rather than just consuming the content that I create. And of course, we have a few series that exist only over on Locals, one on dating and one on faith, that we love to share with you guys too, to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the subjects that we talk about a lot on the stream. So we would love to see you over there. If you can't join us over on Locals, do me a huge favor before we round out the rest of the stream and hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever platform you're watching on right now, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, or Getter. If you have the capacity to repost this stream, please do, especially over on Facebook and Getter. And of course, share the link to this with somebody who would be totally shocked and amazed to see what's really happening behind the scenes with this conception laboratory. Terrifying stuff, but something that we can fight against if we know what's really going on behind the scenes. I love you guys all so very much. YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Getter. We will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern back for the stream. If you're not already joining us over on Locals for the Q&A, and Locals, don't go anywhere. We will be right back.